Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have real conversations on faith, culture, and society. This is Mark Hyde.
And Chris Fuller.
And on today's episode of Real Talk Christian, we are talking about the morality of contraceptives and family planning. And because we're two dudes, we brought in an expert. Fuller, you ready to get schooled?
Let's go.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey guys, Mark here. So the episode you're about to listen to is all about family planning, and with that in mind, we talk about some very sensitive subject matters. Everything from sex to contraceptions to natural ways to even the morality of contraception. So this is a great conversation and one that I think that everyone in the church needs to have the discussion moving forward. But we at least just want to give this little tag, this little warning that what you're going to hear on this episode truly is real talk. Back to the episode.
Now, back to our show.
Fuller.
What's going on, Mark?
Dude, I am heavily caffeinated.
Me too.
Ready to get schooled, ready to have a conversation.
Yeah, this is
exciting stuff,
This
dude.
is going to be an informative conversation that we're having with our special guest today, because I had never heard of it until, and I mean, I've heard of like kind of the thoughts behind it, but I've never heard of actually this, and I'm not going to go into it yet because we're not.
That's not our story to tell.
No.
That's not our story to tell.
Yeah,
but so Fuller, you know, we always drink coffee, right?
Dude, all the time.
Always in our very beautiful RTC mugs.
RTC mugs.
Thank you,
yes.
Janelle.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks, Janelle, for our Christmas presents. But Fuller, are we drinking anything new?
Nope, it's the same Mexican high-grown RTC coffee. That's what it is, man.
But see, here's the kind of deal that I'm thinking, though, right? Because, you know, there was a while where we were, like, every episode was like, oh, we're doing Tim Hortons, we're doing, you know, Dancing Crane, we're doing Komodo blend, we're doing Ethiopian blend, we're doing this. We've been drinking the same stuff now for a while.
That's because
but if it ain't broke, why do we need to fix it?
That's because I made you like 1.5 pounds of it, and so that's what we drink right now.
It's true, bro.
But yeah, I'm getting ready to roast a bunch more tomorrow, and I think I'm going to do a couple different kinds for us, so we have some variety.
Any of that Jamaican stuff you talked about last episode yet?
I am probably going to get that in the next couple of weeks. It's expensive, man.
Well, get a job.
I have a job. What we need is some patrons.
We do. I've been a little preoccupied with some stuff in the personal life to work on some things, but yeah, you know, all the fun things. So we're drinking the normal stuff, the classic stuff,
the RTC coffee.
I'm on our iTunes page right now for the podcast, and we still only have 4 people who have written in. Mama Yates still hasn't reached out yet.
What's up, Mama Yates? Come on.
And I should say I haven't checked yet, but Mama Yates is not really.
Watch, she really hasn't.
She really hasn't.
She's like,
crap.
Where's my RTC mini swag bag?
Whoops. COVID is shutting down everything. So
no, Mark just dropped the ball. It
happens a lot. That's okay. That's why I need an assistant. But either way, we do want to say thank you to Marissa Ladd, Jag Kripe, Coco, the housewife, and Mama Yates for actually taking the time out of their day to write us a review.
Thank you so much.
And we would encourage other people to do it because here's the deal. We produce it free.
Yeah, it's all at our cost.
It's all at our cost. And all we want you to do is leave a review. And here's why. It helps us get into the ears of other listeners.
Right.
And we don't want to get into the ears of other listeners because we are the best, even though
well, let's face
it. I mean, you know, the best do what the best do.
Maybe the best podcasters in South Side of South Bend.
On the corners of York and Jackson. No, York and Ireland.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm so used to saying Jackson, Miami, because where the church is at.
Right.
But either way, dude, we have a fun conversation in store. So, Fuller, what are we talking about, bro?
Man, we are talking about FEMM.
Feminine.
No,
just
I don't remember.
Phlegm, like
no, FEMM. It's an acronym, and we'll let our guest Sara Nass explain what it is. Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's good to be here.
You're joining us from where?
Just on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio.
What?
wait, hold on a second. So what suburb are you in?
We're in Elyria.
Okay.
See,
Yes, Fuller, I actually do know.
Of course you would know that, Mark.
Well, we did a mission trip out in Cleveland, dude.
That's true. I
But we
forgot
need
about
it.
We were out there at Grantwood Community Church in what was that little local community? I don't think it's like their address is in Cleveland. Oh, Parma. They're out of Parma,
Okay.
Ohio, so right there outside of Cleveland. So
Sure.
that might be on the other side, though. I don't
So-
know. But either way, Sarah, so you're from the west side of Cleveland.
So you're
That
living in
is-
Cleveland now. Have you always lived in Cleveland?
I have not. So we actually, my husband is originally from the Cleveland area, but we just moved back about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
So
Now
I
this
was
is me
a little
asking.
bit of everywhere before that.
Yeah, so move back from where?
So before that, Brian and I, my husband and I were in Columbus, Ohio, which is central Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, we were in Chicago, where we were both at school. And before that, I was in Indiana, and then Arizona and Colorado. So a little bit of
You've been
everywhere.
Yeah, you're just a nationwide traveler.
Sure.
Nationwide is on your side.
There you-
Sorry.
and we're dancing around it, but Sarah, you and Fuller have been friends for a long time.
We have, yeah.
yeah,
Yep, it's been since I don't know, our freshman year of high school or something.
something. Yeah, maybe was it?
Oh, did you guys skip the awkward junior high stages together?
I don't remember
Here's
how.
hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. Well, I mean, my little brother, we caught his ears together.
We did. Those were precious times.
What
Those
was
were
your
precious.
what was your guys' nicknames for each other? You and Zach.
He was Pepper and I was Salt.
There you go.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a story that I want to hear at another time because I'm really curious now.
I would gladly tell you that story.
All right. Well, Sarah, why don't you? I mean, we want to know. Our listeners definitely want to know a little bit more about you. We know you live on the west side of Cleveland now. But how long have you been a Christian? Kind of give us a little background on your story.
Sure, absolutely. So I was born in Arizona. My parents were missionaries at a just off of the Navajo reservation at a Christian school out there. And so ever since I was 2 days old, I've been in church, and just my parents really invested in my life of just the importance of the community of believers, but even more than that, just understanding the gospel. And so I remember every Sunday during Sunday school, I would go forward to ask Jesus back into my heart, because I knew that I had been sinful the week before. And this was
Yep.
when I was 3 and 4 years old, I was young still. And then one Sunday, my Sunday school teacher pulled me aside and said, "Hey, let me explain a little bit more about this. You don't need to keep asking Jesus into your heart." And so I was 4 years old when that happened, but I vividly remember her just taking the time out of her lesson and all of that to pull me aside and just explain a little bit deeper. And so then I was baptized when I was 6, and really ever since that have just been growing through Vacation Bible School or youth camps and retreats and all of that. So yeah, I've been a Christian a long time, and I'm blessed by that. I'm so thankful, and just saw a lot of growth throughout my teen years and college years and all of that. So I ended up, I was homeschooled. That's how I know Chris.
Homeschoolers.
Yeah. But I ended up going to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago and studying ministry. It was actually my major was women's ministry and biblical exposition, which is a fancy way of saying preaching, essentially. And so graduated from there in 2011. I met my husband while I was there, my husband, Brian. He's a youth pastor. So
There's my whoop whoop.
yeah. So we are both heavily involved in ministry ever since we graduated. And yeah, he's a youth pastor now. And I'm currently teaching Bible at a local Christian school.
Oh, wow.
And I can't neglect to mention our little guy, Mylan. He's 2.5. And we have one that's due here in a couple weeks. So a little girl.
The oven timer's just about off.
It is. Yep. We're
So
counting
we're
down the days.
we're blessed to have you
Oh,
because
yeah.
you could have gone into labor like 10 minutes ago.
I mean, who knows? Yeah. Maybe in 10 minutes I will. We don't know.
Oh, let's Jesus,
Okay,
Jesus, give us an
so-
hour.
Just kidding.
Jesus, give us an
It's not
hour.
that
There's a part of me that also wants to be like,
That would be great for ratings.
Right?
like
Right,
not
would
that
be
I say I
exciting.
want to, but
I'd be like, Sarah, stay on the podcast and keep talking about this while you're, delivering. This would be great.
keep breathing, Sarah. Keep talking. We ain't done
we'll
yet.
be your coach.
Oh,
You do
dear.
not want.
Okay.
You do not want. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
at
Oh
all.
dear was
Yeah.
the correct
Yes,
response.
yes, it
to
was.
that one.
But you guys have had multiple kids, right? So I'm sure it'd be great.
Well. We have not had multiple kids.
We have
Well, no.
supported the people who have had multiple kids.
As we will discuss later, we were the seed planters. We did not water, and we did not grow, and we did not deliver.
We just planted the seed
All right.
corn.
I see what you did there.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, that's
A
how
little Hoosier.
That's what we did. All right. Well, let's dive into this topic a little bit.
Since we
now that-
already
now that
kind of opened that door.
Yeah, we've already set the pretext here. So what is FEMM?
Yeah, so FEMM stands for, as you mentioned earlier, it's an acronym. It stands for Fertility, Education, and Medical Management. And basically, it's an organization that just wants to help women kind of feel empowered to know what's going on in their bodies and with their hormones, and be able to do a couple different things with that. One would be like family planning in a natural sense,
Mm-hmm.
and then one would be like if there's some kind of hormonal imbalance that they figure out, that they would be able to help in a more natural way, like balance and regulate the hormones.
And so when you say natural way, you mean like without birth control, NuvaRing, any of that stuff, right?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yep. So the basis of FEMM is tracking a woman's cycle. So it's typically about 28 to 30 days roughly of her cycle, and just figuring out there's different biomarkers that we look for in the woman, and just really figuring out, like, are her hormones pretty regulated? And if they are, it's actually fairly simple once you know the method to figure out the few days that you're fertile versus the rest of the time when you're not fertile, and be able to plan your family accordingly. So yeah, it's just an interesting, and yeah, like by all natural, that's exactly what it is. There's no hormones, no like outside things that it's introducing into the body, nothing like that. So it's all based on these biomarkers that are already present in our body, and just learning to identify those and chart them so that we can kind of figure those things out.
I don't want to lose our male listeners here.
Sure.
If you are a male listener and you're like, I do not want to hear this, you need to hear it, especially if you ever plan on becoming a parent. And being married is a pretext in all of our opinions. But
So Eli, you listening still, bro?
Eli, Jagger, all you guys that are younger and thinking about it, I want to keep your attention here. This is some good information that I wish I would have had back when I was 17, 18, 19. So I just wanted to throw that out there for our male listeners, that this is some important stuff if you ever plan on being married. But so I'm just kind of curious, how did you get involved with FEMM?
Yeah, so I was working at a pregnancy help center in Columbus while we lived there, and pregnancy help center being one that, if someone's facing a crisis pregnancy or feels overwhelmed with her pregnancy, she would come to us. We would do a lot of free services, and then connect her with free resources in the area. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do there was help educate women so that we wouldn't be necessarily this just revolving door of women coming in for services and leaving, and then coming right back, the next year or in a couple years or whatever, with a similar situation. And so we really wanted to empower women to understand their body better, and know, just how to kind of naturally help plan for their families and that kind of thing. And so we were introduced to Femme. I was introduced to Femme through my work there,
Mm-hmm.
and I first took the class as a like learning it, just wanting to know more about it
Right.
and utilize it in my own life. And then I realized it was one that I could learn how to present and become an educator for it. And so I took that next step as well. And clinic of Femme in Columbus. So it was a great resource to be able to just have that medical clinic there and be able to point people in their direction. So that was about probably 5 or 6 years ago
Okay.
when I became certified as a Femme educator, and I've just been able to share it with a lot of different women now and families. I mean, some couples have taken it together, which is awesome. And so just being able to share that with a lot of different people now.
That's that's pretty awesome. So do you enjoy being a femme educator? I mean, obviously you would if you took that next step and have continued on with it. What's some of the more difficult challenges as that you find you face being a femme educator?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy it. It's if I could make it a full-time job, I probably would. But I love meeting with couples. A lot of couples decide to do it either soon after they're married or just before they're married,
Hmm.
because they just hear a lot about traditional birth control or hormonal contraception, and they know there has to be a better option. So that's been awesome. The challenges are definitely when like a woman doesn't have a very consistent cycle. So then we
Mm-hmm.
have to really kind of like hone in and focus in and try and figure that out. Whereas a woman who has a very healthy, like pretty easily deciphered cycle, that makes my job easier. But we definitely want to work with the women that's not the case as well and be able to help them out.
Okay. So what are some of the dangers that we see with like like a birth control or an IUD
Mhm.
or some of these other methods that are out there?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think that's a question that a lot of people have or maybe should have, right? Because there are a lot of different things, and just in general, the way that hormonal contraception works. And this is true of whether you're talking about the pill or the mini pill or the IUD. Any of those would be considered hormonal contraception, and they all work in essentially the same way. So the way that works is kind of threefold. And so um, essentially, each method of birth control is decreasing all of the natural hormones that are in a woman's body and supposed to be in a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's replacing them with all kinds of different levels of these synthetic hormones. Um, and so what that does then in the woman's body is it thickens her cervical mucus to
Mm-hmm.
help prevent conception. Then it prevents ovulation, which therefore would prevent conception,
Right.
essentially. And then it thins her uterine lining, which prevents implantation after conception. And
Mm.
this is where I think for a lot of Christians, um, this would pose a big problem
Right.
with hormonal contraception. So this last one of thinning the uterine lining, which prevents implantation. So it prevents a fertilized egg from implanting into the endometrium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's essentially an abortifacient. So, and that sounds like a really strong term to use for this, but I mean, every science agrees. Like once the egg is fertilized, um, that's conception. Like that's the moment of conception.
Right.
And so, um, if life begins at conception, then any amount of like interfering in that is essentially an abortifacient, and so potentially aborting that life. And so I mean, we see in scripture just how in Psalm 139, it talks about like, I knew you, I formed you in the womb, right? And then science even talks about that, that human life begins at the sperm egg fusion. And that's really now universally accepted as a scientific fact. And so, so for me, when I realized that function of birth control, that's when I realized there has to be something better. There has to be a different way to successfully plan for a family and be wise about it, but not utilize something that could be aborting a life.
And not to cut you off, Sarah, I just want to remind our listeners too, we kind of talk about that a little bit in episode 33 with personhood theory.
Right.
And this is why it's important, asking the question of when does, life begins here, but when do they become a person? That's now the argument that scientists are having.
Right.
So if you want to go back and listen to that, that's episode 33. But Sarah, let me ask you this though. So you talk about that these are all the different functions of birth control. Are these all, I should say this, different birth controls do different things, right?
So essentially, they're all doing those three things.
They do all three together. Okay.
Correct. Yep. I believe there's one, I looked this up a couple years ago. If this is still true, there is one birth control that potentially would not do that third step, but that could have changed as well. I would have to review that again, but essentially they're all acting in those three ways that I just mentioned.
So for the Christian then, and I guess this is where a lot of the conversation comes, because in the Protestant circles, I don't know if this is talked about. I think it's just assumed that birth control is what you do to control, family planning, different things like this. I know, at least this is my own understanding, that Femme or just the natural cycles is very, very big in the Catholic Church, of not using these different things. So I guess my question though is then, like, where did birth control come from? Why do we have it? Why do Christians just blindly accept it?
Yeah, that's a huge question too, because I don't know if you all are familiar with Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of what became Planned Parenthood, but she had opened, but like prior to 1950, a few years prior to 1950, she had opened the first birth control clinic, which later became Planned Parenthood. And she underwrote research for the first human birth control pill. And in 1960, this first birth control pill was approved by the FDA. And then in 1968, the first IUD was approved. But then in 1970, actually some feminists challenged the safety of birth control. And
wait. So back up. So feminist were the ones who called it out. Okay. I wasn't expecting to hear that.
Yeah, me either.
Right. Yeah. So they called it out and said, look, we don't know that this is actually safe and actually helpful to women. And so, and kind of I don't know if you would call this a fun fact, but you like way back around that same time, they tried a male version of a birth control pill. And
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Say that again?
I said, yeah, I've heard of that actually.
Okay. Yeah. So they tried this to market this male version of a birth control pill. And the men were saying, no, this has terrible side effects. We don't want to deal with this. And so they cut that off. They didn't continue producing that anymore. And then, but the women were still taking it, like essentially a very similar version of it with similar side effects and all of that. And so, just interesting, kind of how it started out with Margaret Sanger, because she is now pretty widely known as a eugenicist. That she really kind of started that to decrease certain populations, and in order to make sure like other populations continued.
And when you say populations, just so we're clear, it was genetic or not? No, racial groups, right?
Correct.
Right.
Racial, and also like economic standing had a certain part in that as well. But But yeah, mostly it was a racial issue. And so that's a big problem, obviously.
Right.
And then, as we look at side effects, there are all kinds of different side effects that are prevalent with hormonal contraception. Some of those being mood swings. Some are, I actually know someone who right after she had her second child, she was rushed back to the hospital with terrible chest pain. And the doctors found out she had a double pulmonary embolism, and they caught it just in time. She survived. They were able to operate, and they asked her, like, were you on a hormonal contraception? And she said, yeah. And they said, well, that's probably the cause of these blood clots that almost took your life. And so blood clots are a huge issue with birth control as well. And then, there's a wide gamut, kind of depending on which one you're specifically taking. But there are some that are kind of a life or death kind of side effect. And I don't necessarily want to play that game either, you know? And I don't think women in general should, especially when there are other options out there.
So let me, we've talked about the side effects, obviously. Planning around cycles, there's really no side effect to that other than if you don't plan right, then you may end up pregnant.
Which all children are blessings.
So what's the success rate between using a FEMM method compared to like a birth control method? I mean, we obviously know it's more dangerous to use birth control, but what's like the success for being able to plan accordingly for your family?
Yeah, that's a great question. So birth control is highly effective if you use it correctly. And granted, there's a little bit of difference, again, just in which specific kind you take. But really, it's like 98 to 99% effective. Now, if you take the certain pill that you have to take at a specific time every single day, the effectiveness is going to drop if you don't follow those directions specifically.
Right, user error.
Exactly. But it's interesting because with FEMM, if you learn the method and you practice it consistently and effectively, the success rate is essentially the same. So you can get, it's, I think, between 96 and 99% effective. If it takes diligence to chart each day, but really it also takes about 5 seconds when you get used to it, to what you're charting and what you're looking for. So that was super encouraging to me as well, just in learning about FEMM, because that's important, when you're thinking about just the responsibility that we have in raising children and all of that. And so the effectiveness is actually pretty similar.
So let me ask you this then, Sarah. So if the effectiveness for both are, let's say, the same, why are people either A, still pushing birth control, and then B, why are people still using it?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of reasons for that. One is that it's so widely marketed, that I was the same way when I was in high school and kind of thinking toward college and thinking toward marriage eventually. I just thought that's what everybody did, right? Like when you're engaged or getting married or whatever, you just start out on birth control, then you're good. When you want to have a kid, you get off. And it's also not always that simple, because when you mess with your hormones, that can really mess with your ability to have children in the future. But that's another side effect. So yeah, I think it's widely marketed, and it's just kind of what I always thought you did. And I didn't know about other options. Excuse me. And so as I got to college, I actually did my senior wellness presentation on different methods of birth control, how well they work, the side effects and all of that. And that's when I really learned about more natural options, right? That there are other things out there that can work just as well without all of the negative side effects. And so I think it's largely a marketing thing that people just don't always know about things like Femme and the natural family planning side, or they have a bad representation of it, right? Because
misinformation or lack thereof.
Exactly. Right. Like when I just think of like I thought of when I first thought of natural family planning, I thought of, well, the woman with 12 kids telling me that I should plan my family.
That's naturally. Really funny.
You know what I mean? And it's like, that's awesome. If that's, what God has called them to do and all of that. I do not bash that at all.
Right.
But I also thought, does it really work?
Yeah.
And so, so I just had to go through and do some research and just figure out like, okay, how does it actually work? I want to know the kind of the background, the backstory of it and how it's working. And then once I learned that, it totally made sense. And it, I think once you really learn, I think the incredible thing about natural family planning is when you really learn how God created your body to function and how you can track along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's incredible. It's incredible to see how God orchestrated it and that he gives us windows and glimpses into how he created our body to work. So I think that's kind of an incredible benefit as well to natural family planning.
Yeah. So I have my next question here. And like we kind of talked about before the show, Mark and I are just, some of the questions we're just flat out the cusp.
Clueless.
So if you don't know, that's fine. As long as we can, at the end of the show, we'll point people through you to the right
we'll all get educated.
But okay, so say I'm a female, and I've been doing the Femme, or I'm another female and I've been doing the birth control. And I decide, hey, I'm ready to have a baby. What is the time frame from between, doing the Femme program to birth control to where you have the higher probability of becoming pregnant?
Yeah. So with Femme, the awesome thing is you learn so much about how your body's functioning and when you're fertile and when you're not. That the day you decide you would like to start trying to have a child, it automatically transfers over to that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do anything different except have intercourse at different times. Right. And so, there's not really any like, I wouldn't say any planning or preparation when you're using Femme. It's just kind of changing your mindset to, okay, I'm no longer trying to prevent this at all. I'm trying to accomplish this. And so it's just kind of changing your mindset. Whereas with hormonal contraception or birth control, it's different for every woman. And there's no way really to know how long it's going to take your body to stop. Like I mentioned right at the beginning, that birth control essentially makes your normal natural hormones dormant, and it just suppresses them all and replaces them with these artificial synthetic hormones. And so there's no way for a woman to know how long it's going to take for her real natural hormones to pick back up where they left off and be able to be healthy again. And so it might just be a month. It might be 6 months. It might take a couple years. It's just, you have no way of really knowing that.
Right.
So whereas with Femme, again, it's, if you've been tracking your cycle, there's no and not at all to say that it'll happen the very first time or the very, or the second time that you try, but there's, there's not that waiting period of just not knowing what's going on in your body.
So I'm a male, obviously. Obviously I know kind of when my wife's cycle is, but as a male, at what point, if I'm wanting to, me and my wife are wanting to have children, at what point do I actually, do the deed to have my best chances?
Yeah.
Did you just say do the deed?
I did. Do the deed. Sow the corn seed.
That's called sex, Fuller.
I understand that.
Sorry, I had
he was
to.
homeschooled. We got to cut him some.
I was homeschooled
but,
with the K.
Called out. Go for it, Sarah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So essentially there's kind of this, I don't want to say formula, but there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's different biomarkers that women look for to know at what point they're at in their cycle. And so, women can tell if they're trained and they know what they're looking for, the few days that they're considered fertile. And so if you want to have a baby, you would look for those specific biomarkers of when she's fertile. And it's usually a span of about 3 to 5 days of fertility, with the peak day, or typically the last day of fertile cervical mucus being the point of highest probability of getting pregnant or achieving pregnancy. And so she would be looking for, but she would also know, if she had been charting for a while, she would know kind of what point that comes in her cycle. And so at that point would be the highest probability of achieving conception or achieving pregnancy, if that was the objective. And that's typically around day 14, but we also look for a lot more specific things than just guessing a number of day.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're looking for those biomarkers. So when her cervical mucus is the most fluid and like the most easily transferable for sperm, that's the easiest day for her to get pregnant.
Okay. So yeah, obviously if you haven't figured out by now, listeners, that we're talking about sex and having children or planning on having children. But my next question would be, and a lot of these are just curiosity questions for me, because like I said, I had never heard of Femme before. And I was kind of like you were talking about in high school and college early years, and you just assumed that, hey, get married and birth control. And I mean, that's what my wife has always done, is we've done birth control, and I'd never really questioned it before. So this is all new to me. But as a husband, how can I support my wife best on utilizing the Femme program?
Yeah. So I would say a few different ways. So one would be attending a class with her. If she wants to learn, it is super helpful. Like, I know for me, Brian didn't attend the first class with me, but once I started getting interested in teaching it, he was all about like, do you have flashcards that we can go over? Like, how can I help you study for all of this and all of that?
Now that's a good man.
Yeah. And so just that support and like knowing this is not just a woman decision, right? This is not just a wife decision. This is a couple's decision to make together. And I think that's huge. That's super important. So just having that support of like, hey, I'm interested in learning more about this. Would you be interested in it? Maybe let's find a class together. And like, I do free introductory classes just to help people kind of get their feet wet and start understanding a little bit more about it. So even just, maybe finding one of those to get connected with. And then just, being willing to learn alongside her and just supporting her in that would be huge, and necessary if this is the route that you decide to go.
Right.
And then there's really a necessity of her tracking her cycle every evening. So just sitting down for a minute. Femme has a really great app. It's a free app that you can download and just, it's quick to input the information, but even just maybe setting a reminder on her phone to remember to do that, or reminding her yourself, or whatever, just so that she knows that she's supported in that, and that you don't just see it as a her responsibility. You know what I mean? Because it's really both and.
Okay, Sarah. So I know we're getting close to the time, but I have two big questions for you. So here we go. I got a practical question and then an ethical question. So here's my practical one, okay? So how do you work with a person who has taken birth control since they were probably like a teenager to regulate their cycles? how do you work with someone who has done that and now is saying, I want to try this natural thing, but I don't know what to expect?
Sure. Yeah, that happens frequently, actually. So like I said, it can take a lot of time sometimes. So once she's off of hormonal contraception, we encourage her just start charting right away. Go to a class, figure out what biomarkers you're looking for, what kinds of things you need to be charting, and just really dedicate yourself to doing it well and learning it well. And then, it might take a while. It might take months. It might take up to a year or so. But really the point is just for us to walk with her through that process of learning and transitioning and from birth control to a more natural method. And so that's really what the Femme educators are here for.
So there's a community of support.
Go through that process. Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. All right.
Yeah.
So here's the ethical question. You ready? So
I'm ready.
So we all will agree. I mean, we're all believers. We're all Christians. We're people of the book. So we all believe that. I had to, Fuller. So we believe that kids are a gift from God, right? Like no one would disagree with that. God is the one who. Well, okay, maybe not all kids are a gift. Some kids are a test and a trial. But my 2 kids are wonderful gifts. But they're also not teenagers yet, so I don't know yet. So, but kids are a gift from God. So here's my ethical question. Should we even be doing FEMM since it has the same results as birth control for us dictating when we have kids and when we don't?
Whoa,
yeah,
that's a lot.
Sorry.
That's a great question. And honestly, one that I've wrestled with a little bit. And I wouldn't say that I have found anything in scripture that says clearly one way or the other. Like you said, we know that children are a blessing and a gift from the Lord, and we embrace that, right? Yeah. For sure. We also know that life begins at conception. It begins in the womb, according to Psalm 139, that God has planned that life from the time they were in the womb. And so in those areas, I would say, like, yes, children are to be loved and accepted no matter if you planned for them or not, right? However, I also don't see anything that would necessarily dictate us away from a responsible planning for our families.
Good stewardship.
Now, I would say if it involved like abortion or taking a life or anything like that, certainly we know that is not God's heart.
Right.
There's healing and there's forgiveness if that's in someone's story for sure. But I just look at a few different things. So we plan for things like retirement, right? I mean, typically if you're in ministry, maybe not, but I'm just kidding.
Just because okay. I actually do, but you know.
It's a little harder sometimes.
You're a pastor's wife. You get it. Sarah's a pastor's wife.
Ministry people can buy into stocks right now and be okay. They're cheap.
Double down.
Right.
But we plan for retirement.
We plan for things, right? We plan for retirement. We plan for buying a house. We plan for the big decisions. And so I don't necessarily see that there's anything wrong with planning for a family when when you're doing it in a way that's not taking a life, but simply planning for, maybe the right timing and that kind of thing. However, I also applaud the people who decide, no, you know what? I'm not gonna do any of these methods.
I'm just gonna keep popping them out as fast as I can.
Right, exactly. And I know people that is part of their story, and that's awesome too. But I just wouldn't say that I found anything that would make me feel morally or ethically or scripturally bad about utilizing a natural method of planning for a family.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I personally agree with everything you just said.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
So, I mean, we just want to hear the expert's opinion because we are men and we have not had to push a baby out.
You could become experts, though. That's what I want you to know.
This is true, but there's something special that women have that men can never have. No matter how many things they
A brain?
well, that too, and a heart.
But, and a uterus.
There it is.
That's the big one. No matter how many cuts we do, we will never have one. So, sorry, that was a bad joke. Anyways, so my personal final question that I have for you, because we don't want to keep you on too much longer, but we have a lot of young listeners, a lot of high school, college age kids that are listening to our podcast faithfully every week. What would your advice be to those who are not married yet, but eventually plan to be married and have a family?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly do some research. I don't think there's anything wrong with just even if it's research like personal. Like I talked to my parents before I ever got married, mostly my mom, but it was just like, hey, what is going on here with like birth control and all of that? And she had some pretty frank conversations with me, and I appreciated that because she really helped point me in what I believe is the right direction as well. But also, Femme has an awesome class called Teen Femme, like teenager Femme. And it's focuses a lot more on just the hormones, and it's specifically for young women, but it focuses on their hormones and what they're going through, just in puberty and all of that. And it's a great starting point. I've had moms do it with their daughters before, and that's awesome because it really just opens up conversation and just starting to even think about what might be next. Right. And what direction they want to go when they do decide to get married and that kind of thing. And so I think that can be a really helpful resource as well.
I like it. So Sarah, where can people find out more about Femme?
Yeah, if they go to femhealth.org, I'm double checking myself right now because I don't want to say it wrong. Femhealth.org. Would be the place to get more information about Femme in general. And then if they want to contact me, I don't know if you're able to put my email or anything in the show notes.
We can do whatever you give us permission.
Yeah. Yep. That would be awesome. If they have specific questions, and just want to shoot me an email, that's totally an option too. But femhealth.org will give some really good information and just some more background on Femme and just what they're all about. And then, you can contact me as well.
No, that's super cool. And then for the teenage Femme, is that on femme.org as well, just on the various pages?
Yeah. Yep. You would be able to find it there. It's going to be under like their different classes that they offer, I believe.
Okay.
So.
No, that's super cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So I do want to challenge I know there's at least one listener specific who they actually wrote to us and kind of mentioned this, and it was kind of cool. And when I mentioned, we're going to be talking about this specific topic, they were like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. Cause I'm engaged, looking to get married. So I want to challenge the people who do have questions. Hit Sarah up. I mean, Sarah, this is something that you obviously are passionate about. You're knowledgeable. You're a strong believer, all these different things. So if there are people out there, don't be scared to reach out. She gave you guys permission,
Absolutely.
People.
And if for some reason you can't find her email in the show notes, go ahead and contact Real Talk Christian Podcast at gmail.com, and we will get you that information.
I love it. So Sarah, before we let you go though, is there anything else you would like to say about this topic that we may have missed?
You know what? I think we covered so much that there's still so much to cover. But I just want to reiterate again just how incredible it is the way that God created our bodies, and just how intricately it works. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to get a glimpse into that and just see how incredible our designer and our creator is. And just be able to kind of and see his hand at work in all of that. And so that's been one of the coolest things for me about Femme, and something that I hope to pass on to anyone else who takes the class and and hears about it as well. So
I love it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great having you on, Sarah. Thanks for being on with us and agreeing to.
Thank you for having me.
But we can't let you go yet, though, Sarah.
Not yet.
Because you see, you already had your time for a fun fact, and I know you're a listener, so you know what's coming. But
That
Fuller,
is true.
do you have a fun fact for us today?
I definitely have a fun fact. I've had one every.
Is Janelle pregnant?
No, no. She would kill me right now. We have 3 under 3. She would kill me.
Sorry, whoever eardrum I just busted laughing really loud. Sorry, this was a fun fact. Pregnant number 4. Woo! I was hoping.
Yeah,
but
she would be horrified with me at this time. I'd be sleeping here at your house, so.
I mean, you can sleep in my couch, I guess. But
anyways, so
what you got for us,
the
bro?
fun fact for today, Mark, did you know a sheep, a duck, and a rooster were the first passengers in a hot air balloon?
Wait. Say, a sheep?
A sheep, a duck, and a rooster.
Okay.
Yeah, you heard me right. In 1783, the first hot air balloon was launched carrying a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. The flight lasted for 8 minutes before landing safely with its passengers. That's the fun fact of the day.
That's a very random and hilarious and fun. Fun fact. It's fun facts with Fullers, right?
Kind of a fun fact, but it's not one of my better ones, but I still enjoyed it. It made me chuckle, so that's all that matters.
It's still fun. It was a good time. But Sarah, thank you again so much for joining us. Encourage you listeners, reach out to her if you do have any questions. But make sure you hit us up on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts as well, specifically Apple Podcasts. We'd love for you guys to leave us a rating and review. And honestly, share this episode with people who you think would need to be able to hear it.
Definitely. And if you have any other further questions for Mark and I, hit us up at realtalkchristianpodcast@gmail.com.
But not about this topic.
But this one, we'll just refer you to Sarah.
We'll refer you to Sarah. But seriously, Sarah, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Well, hey, guys, until next time.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to Real Talk Christian. To help get our podcast into the ears of other people who need to hear these conversations, we would love for you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. To keep the conversations going, feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and share our content with others. See you next time.